Welcome to Charlotte Readers Podcast, where authors give voice to the written words. This is our 200th episode celebratory video, and this is the podcast studio where I started out at Advent Co-working. Great place to podcast, and this is me in the studio trying to figure out how the hell to work a mixing board. And this is me laughing about the fact I couldn't figure it out. Thank you for being here today. We're celebrating our 200th episode. It's really 200th episode month. We've got a lot of great episodes this month, but we're reflecting today on the journey, the podcast journey, what's it all about, where'd it come from, and we're going to do it with photos and a few videos as well. Ought to be a lot of fun. Thanks first to my sister, Jenny Cianciola. She is the musical talent in the family. It's her piano arrangements that you're hearing in the background. She has put this together. She's playing it, and I hope you will enjoy that through the process. So we're going to talk about the beginning of the podcast. We're going to throw some photographs in here of what we did along the way, and we're going to have a good time. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We'll talk more about some of that as we get further along here, but let's dive into how this thing got started. So it really got started with me as a reader. That's me on the beach reading books, and then kind of transitioned to where I went into the legal field and finally got to take my tie off, and then I started writing books in my 50s. I wrote my first book there, The Christmas Heist, and added another one, The Legally Binding Christmas, and then I had 3 books I could have fun with, and that was a real fun experience, kind of get away from the practice of law and be creative, and now I had a trilogy, and then the question was, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to dance right out of the law firm here. This is retirement, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I talked to Sarah Viver about it, and she says, why don't you start a podcast? And she took me in a studio and told me how to do it, and at least got me started. And I said, I don't really quite understand, and she kept working with me. And then I hired Robert Ingalls of Law Pods, and he set me straight, got me to understand how things worked. And there's Parker Zaya, my first guest on the podcast. So getting into podcasting was a little bit accidental, a little bit intentional. People ask me, why did I do this thing called podcasting? Well, because I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know how to do it. Figured it'd be a fun challenge. But also because I wanted to learn more about writing. And if you're going to do that, there are 2 things you can do. You can read books. You can take writing. Well, I said 2 things, probably 3 things. You can take writing courses. And you can ask other authors how they do what they do. So that's what I did. I've been reading books, I've been taking, classes, and I've been interviewing authors. And, that's just a way to improve my writing. In fact, I'm working on my fourth book now and honing in on the final stages of it. And a lot of what I was able to do with that came from little things that I've learned along the way in interviewing authors that I wouldn't have learned necessarily in a class, but just through conversation. So it's been a great experience for me to not only learn a new skill set, which is, how to get voices from an audio recorder or from this internet thing out there into the podcast world, but also to learn more about the craft of writing and to sort of find the stories behind the stories of these authors. People say, okay, can you boil it down? If I want to start a podcast, what is it? Well, don't listen to those people that say all you need is a microphone and the ability to talk. Those are 2 things that you need, right? But you need more than that. You need, I'd substitute persistence and patience. Those are 2 of my 5 P's of podcasting. The first P of podcasting is just production. You gotta figure out, how to do it. You gotta figure out how to record. You gotta figure out how to edit. You gotta figure out how to load it and get it out there and so forth. And you got to schedule with people and do all those things that go into the production part of it. And then there's the second P, which is the performance aspect of it. One of the things I didn't realize, was that, your audience wants to be entertained, and I hope people have been entertained by listening to the podcast, because I certainly have been entertained by doing the interviews. That's why it's a laid-back deal, and I like to laugh and have a conversation with authors about what they do. But that's number 2, performance. And then I said persistence. Well, Most podcasts don't last past 10 episodes, I think, and people quit and give up. I'm really proud that we got to 200. We're going to get well beyond that because I've already pre-recorded a number of episodes that are coming into the spring and the summer. So persistence and then patience. Don't forget to hit the record button like I did one time. That takes patience not to beat yourself up. It takes patience when you have to cancel and reschedule. It takes patience to have to learn to deal with all the little things you have to learn to deal with that you don't know how to do. And then finally, the fifth P is people. The people who listen, people who come and sit down and give their time to be a part of this thing called Charlotte Readers Podcast and share their stories that they've written and the stories of their own stories. And so, and that's kind of what I want to talk about now. I want to move into the people because I'll talk a little bit with some photographs here about the team that we've got at Charlotte Readers Podcast. I'll talk about the sponsors and supporters, my family, and so forth. So let's do a little bit of that. I got a few pictures for that. Okay, I'd like to introduce our team. This is Tom Pataccio. He's our web designer, and he's done a great job with that. You can see here the website. We've actually continued to improve it. And Hannah Turner, who's now Hannah LaRue, and Hannah is our publicist. She has been coming up with great ideas. Here we are talking and meeting, and she helps with our newsletter. And here's our social media team. That's Renee and Wade, and they are Social Grit Marketing. They help with the Facebook, Instagram, and all that good stuff. And of course, you can't do all this alone, so good work there. And then we have Shauna Morgan. Shauna used to be with Parker Books. She's now doing lots of different things and helping me with show notes and other things. And speaking of Parker Books, they were an early sponsor of the podcast and really helped us get going. There's Sally Brewster, the owner of the store, and we had a good time talking there. There's James. He is telling me about the books on the shelf. And then we got Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, another sponsor, longtime sponsor of the podcast. Ann is here from Charlotte Mecklenburg Library telling us about the library. And then Seth and his buddy Casey appeared on the show recently to talk about their book. And then Advent Co-working. Okay, that's where the podcast studio is. And this is Charlotte, and Charlotte's a bundle of energy. And this is Sam, and Sam is also a bundle of energy. And they do great work at Advent Co-working. Twin City Podcast Network, we're a part of that. This is Brian Baltashevitz. They do great work, more than 24 podcasts in the local area, speaking to local things. And then I'm on the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Gosh, moving fast here. Charlotte Writers Club, local writing group that we partner with. And Charlotte Lit, go take a course there as well. Great stuff. And the North Carolina Writers Network also. And then we have a relationship with Libro.fm. Use the promo code Charlotte Reader. You might get something extra. Family. This is my mother. She came to the studio, wanted to see what I was up to. This is my dad before he passed away. Both of us Davison graduates, son and daughter, Hamlin and Jordan. We are not together as much as we'd like to be, but they've been real supportive. And speaking of kids, this is Gus on the left and Lori on the right, both rescues. Gus is named after Augustus McCrae in the book Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. Lori is Lori Darling. She was also in that book. Sad to hear about him passing away, Larry McMurtry. And Lola's getting in the act too. She wants to listen to the podcast. This is Janet and me. That is me, Santa Claus. Here we are on a trip out west. And then Janet read a book she really liked and decided she would lead as a guest host. And then Jordan did the same thing. Both those episodes are up this month. Lots of great stuff. So one of the things I'd like to do now is thank our patrons. We have this thing called Patreon to support the podcast. It covers about a third of our costs when you add in the sponsors. So it helps me get closer to that thing called break even. But really do appreciate that support. And what we've done there with Patreon is we've created an additional set of interviews that we're probably up to about 50 or 60 now that you can access on our Patreon channel. These are deeper dive interviews on topics about writing and reading. And since, I think in, 2020, we released 32 of those episodes. They were longer. They were about an hour long each. In 2021, we've been releasing pretty much one Patreon episode with every free episode. That is, the author hangs around for another 30 minutes. We talk about the craft or business of writing. Put that on our Patreon channel. You can get that for $5 or $8 a month. You can tip a little bit to give $8. Sometimes I do some additional things for the $8 crowd. But that's it. You can, for that little bit of a contribution, you get access to all this content. So if I'm doing my math right, 8, 16, 24 plus 32. Yeah, we're over 50 Patreon episodes, close to 60. And you can listen to them just like a regular podcast because you get a private RSS feed through Patreon. You don't have to know what that means. I'll send you an email if you sign up. But it's just another way that we can help, get some support for the podcast. And I learn a lot, about interviewing the authors. And I think people, who listen really enjoy as well. So what I've got now, photographs. These are patrons who have actually been on the podcast, been connected with the podcast. I apologize to those patrons who are supporting me, who hadn't been on the podcast, but, I really appreciate your support as well. I dug through and pulled out these photos of these folks that have been supporting us. We're just going to put a little music to this, and you can see different settings of people reading and talking about their work. So here we go. Now, if I missed anybody in that montage who's one of my supporters who I should have a picture of somewhere, please email me, let me know. I'll feature you in the next newsletter. I'll be certain to mention you. Also to Jim and Betty Simone, you hadn't been on the podcast, but you were our first Patreon supporter. Really appreciate that. We've got about 52 patrons right now. We'd love to get to 100. So if you like the idea of maybe being a part of this podcast and supporting us and getting some extra content in return, join up. patreon.com/Charlotte Readers Podcast. Oh, and the other thing we're doing is, this isn't going to bring in much money, but it's kind of fun. We're playing with this stuff. We now got the Charlotte Readers Podcast beer mug. You can go to our store, and you can. It's on the website. You can click on that, and you can see all the things we've got. I like this one. It's the Charlotte Readers Podcast pint glass. See, we got a theme going here because the next thing you've got here is the Charlotte Readers Podcast flask. So with these three things, any writer can do anything possible, right? So, but if you're a writer and you like a little notebook, we've got the Charlotte Readers Podcast notebook. So keep all your notes there, and we got a little, got to have a bag to carry your books in. So we've got that on the site too. And Janet likes this one, just the Charlotte Russe Podcast wine cooler. I think we got a couple other things on there too, a coffee mug and a coffee container of some kind. But check that out because, it's kind of fun. We're going to be doing a couple more things here before this is over. We've got a couple more segments. We've got, let's see, we had to go from the studio to the internet. So I'm going to throw some kind of a montage here of just some photographs of us in the studio, transitioning to some photographs of, that we're on, which is Squadcast, so we do over the internet of that. And then I'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more, and then I've got a couple final things to do. And so, yeah, let's watch a few pictures of people, in the studio and in Squadcast. So let's check it out. So I know we weren't able to get everybody who's been on the show in that little montage, partly because I couldn't get my hands on all the pictures, and some of the pictures didn't turn out as well as they should. But here's the thing. Everybody who's been on the podcast is on our guest list at charlotteruspodcast.com. You can go there, go to charlotteruspodcast.com, look across the top for guest list, scroll through the names, click on the name. You can see all about the guest, all their information, see their photograph and other things as well. Plus, there's an audio player. You can play it right there. We've been really working hard on the website. We've got an episode page now that runs from 1 to 200 now, and we'll keep going, which you can just scroll through and check them out there. Or you can listen wherever you like to listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. So it's out there. So now, one of the things I was able to do over the course of this 200 episodes is I started doing some events. We tried some live events. I've moderated some panels. We've done things in bookstores. We've done them elsewhere. And I've got a few photographs of some of those events. I thought I would share those. And I'm going to mix in with those event photographs some other photos related to the podcast itself. And then we'll finish up with a few video clips. and then we'll call it a wrap for this 200th episode celebration video. So that last photo with me with the birthday hat on, I think Renee did that for my one of the birthdays I had during this 2-year stretch. And but it's really, this 200th episode is kind of a birthday for the podcast. It's really a milestone for us. We're really proud to have made it this far and not run out of gas. And still got a little gas in the tank. We've already started priming it for the spring and the summer. I've already pre-recorded a number of episodes and got some good stuff coming. We'll post each month what's coming in the next month. Check out our newsletter, which we now call the Book Report. We don't spam you. That takes way too much time. But if you go on the website, charlotterespodcast.com, and sign up every couple of weeks, we're going to send you a newsletter that has information about what's coming, information about the podcast, reading tips, writing tips, some videos, that kind of thing. And also, we started a community blog. If you're a writer out there, you've been on the podcast, maybe you haven't, but you still want to contribute something to the reading and writing community, go to our community blog and submit to be on it. Anybody can do that. We'd love to have you contribute to the writerly content that appears on that community blog, which we also publish at our website and in our newsletter. So as we wrap this up, we did this thing where Martin Castor helped me with some videos we did at one time. We were in a contest the WFE ran, and it was a great experience because we got together, recorded with a number of people, and we created some videos. Got a few clips here from that experience that we participated in. We'll use that to kind of wrap the show up. When you think about podcasting, I hope you'll consider giving Charlotte Readers Podcast a listen. If you've been on here as an author, we really appreciate it. Thank you for supporting the show, not only with your talent, your work, your stories, but also by telling others about it. And, if you just want to, spread the word, we'd love to have you do that. This is really a project where I'm trying to, it's not easy sometimes for authors to, get the word out about their books, and particularly this past year during the pandemic. So going on a podcast is one way to do that. And if just submit, you might get on the podcast and we can have a great conversation. We have really continued to try to improve the show as we go. In the early years, we tried different things, and I think we had some great episodes. They were a little bit longer than what we're doing now. We've kind of settled into a format now that's 30 to 40 minutes or thereabouts with no interruptions. We do the book. We have a little 2 to 3 minute reading in the middle of the show. talk a little bit of writing life, and then we jump over to Patreon for those who support us, and we do a deeper dive with the author if they've got time to hang around and talk about one of the topics of writing. And I've, as I said earlier, I've had a great time doing that, and I've learned a lot, and it's helped me in my own writing. So we'll finish up with these with this video, and let's move forward in the podcast world. Thank you for tuning in, and happy birthday to us. Welcome to Charlotte Readers Podcast, where authors give voice to their written words. This is the show where we meet Charlotte area authors and those who visit the Queen City, and we hear them read their work. Today, I'd like you to meet some of the authors who've appeared on the podcast and get a feel for what we do on the show. I'm your host, Landis Wade. Thank you for listening, and in this case, for watching too.
So tell us about the podcast.
Yeah, so, this is a show where we bring on Charlotte area authors and those who visit the Queen City, and we hear them read their work. It's we do get into questions about their work and their writing life, but more than that, like the tagline says, they're giving voice to their written words because they're actually reading their work.
Was it all just a big misunderstanding, the uncoupling? Did I make it all up? Could we have tried harder, different, better? If we're this civil and even friendly, then why, exactly, did we split up? This is the story of a charmed divorce.
So, Kathy, is there such a thing as a charmed divorce?
No. No, I mean, not at all.
But it's a good title, right?
It's a great title. I mean, there are charmed circumstances,
sure.
and that's what we had.
The jury deliberated for 2 days, read some Bible verses on forgiveness, talked the manslaughter holdouts around, and found Nellie Freeman not guilty by reason of insanity, it not being unheard of that a woman could be struck crazy for a short period of time, long enough to kill a lying, cheating husband. The judge allowed her to take her bloody dress and razor with her, and she seems to have vanished from Charlotte. Now that's what I wrote, but as it turned out, she went to Kentucky, married, came back to Charlotte, lived just north of Uptown for 40 years, happily married, raised her family, and died at Mercy Hospital in 1964.
I've got one called The Lawyer's Spouse here.
This is the one I like.
Yeah.
Because it's happened to me at home.
I'm glad there's at least one thing you like in the book.
Okay, JD.
The Lawyer's Spouse. That won't work on me. I'm not opposing counsel. Objection, my ass.
Yeah, it's like... Wife says, don't cross-examine me. I'm not your witness. I'm not your client.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
What makes a good memoir?
So I think the first thing, the most important part is, and this is a tip that everyone gives for anybody who wants to write memoir, you have to be twice as hard on yourself as you are on anybody else, which means you're unearthing all these memories that are stored in layers in the hopes of uncovering the deepest patterns of your personality. And that's the reward for writing memoir, is self-understanding.
Mensch is a Yiddish word reserved for those few special people we hold in the highest esteem, those who earn our deepest respect. I met such a young man on a sunny, crisp December afternoon on the campus of East Carolina. In that moment of recognition, all those years of being a single parent, feelings of inadequacy, the sleepless nights, paid their dividends in full. I had raised a Mensch.
That's a wonderful story, and I can see how when you read it again, you get emotional about it.
Oh, even now.
I stand too fat, too bald, too old, too dull. I try to will my love into the world. I carve her face in stone and text the gods. I wear a bra upon my brow and chant, in hopes of swiping her into my life. I kiss the screen and wish for her warm lips, but taste of only the cold, hard screen.
Does your wife know that you're on Tinder? Yeah.
I actually had to ask friends about Tinder in order to figure that out.
Now, you've got another work of LGBT fiction coming out in May, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Called Cleo's Rising.
Yeah, it's called Cleo Rising. It's the story. It takes place in 1983, so it's a little bit later than the Ada decades.
And this character comes from Western North Carolina?
Yes, she does. She comes from just outside of Asheville, and in 1983 she decides that Asheville is too small a town for her, and that she moves to New York City to pursue a career in publishing. And through a series of events, she becomes the Gal Friday to a writer of the lost generation, a woman who accomplished one great book and then sort of became a recluse.
I think of her strange phrases, her agitation. Was it all a code, a message she was trying to send to the people she loved? A message that said, I'm still here, I need you.
I can tell that it's difficult for you even still to read that, isn't it?
It brings back a lot of memories.
Yeah. But the great thing about it is that through that pain, there was this sense that she knew who you were.
Yeah,
yes. Yeah, and that had to make your heart whole.
It was such a gift. Yeah. And those moments just only came every once in a while. But when they did, it was like, wow, just a treasure.
Sunday evenings driving back to KC, over that beige rolling prairie, it was always the same. Guilt, doubt, and bug splatter. Coyotes gnawed his Goodyear tires. Roadkill grinned from the side of the road by the light of a madman moon.
The light of a madman moon. That doesn't sound like a very fun trip back and forth.
No.
Yeah. Now, you've been known, Gary, you read 4 stories on the podcast, and I've been reading your work. You've been known to write some sort of dark, edgy pieces, right? After you offended all these women, you were out and about yourself one time, right? And you'd been to yoga, and you thought, I got to get a coffee or something.
Gonna scoot right in that Starbucks.
And you scooted right in. And what happened?
Well, because karma is a you-know-what.
Right.
I was spotted by a girlfriend, and she said, well, look who's out in Starbucks in her yoga pants.
She took a picture, too, right?
She took a picture, put it up on Facebook. Went viral, and then I became one of the top 12 in the year-end fashion review of the Charlotte Observer.
Yeah, be careful what you write about. Let's start with Beth's opinion, which I think Beth's her is the protagonist friend, right?
She was the best friend.
Yeah, all right,
yes.
Well, let's hear from her.
Okay. So everyone in the whole room focused on my teeth to determine what my basic color was. The class decided it was brown, as in mud, rats, rotten bananas, swamp water, and dirty anything. I ran out the side door after school. Thank heavens home ec was last period, thinking my cheeks were so hot they must be leaving a trail of smoke.
Violent crime had begun ticking upward nationally. The day before Belton walked into Piedmont courts with his gun concealed under a poncho, the New York Times published its first front-page story about crack, an addictive, purified form of cocaine that had appeared in the Bronx and was spreading through the city. Crack hadn't hit Charlotte yet, at least not in large quantities. That would soon change.
Yeah, and a lot changed in this book. You've got a real arc here from Money Rock, which we'll talk about in just a second. But the nice thing about your book, that when I read it, was it reads a bit like a novel, but you get a lot of facts about Charlotte in the process. What was it like to walk the land of your father with your father?
Yeah, it was powerful. It really felt like there was this sort of rooted consciousness that came up. It was like we were one, and we had had so many conflicts over the years. It just went away, and I just understood him in a totally different way.
So what do you think of the podcast?
Oh, I love the podcast. And I'm going to tell you something.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've told you this, but you do a marvelous job of getting, you're so subtle and so gentle about it, but you really ask the questions that make people really open up. And I just think it's wonderful. And, we have such a wonderful array of authors and poets and writers in this community. And you really are able to get things out of us that maybe some of us are trying to hold back, although we write about it, but you do a marvelous job.
Thanks, you did that just like I asked you to. Well, that's it for today. Another set of authors giving voice to their written words. Please tune in to Charlotte Readers Podcast. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to get your podcasts, and at our website, charlottereaderspodcast.com. Until the next episode, I'm Landis Wade for Charlotte Readers Podcast.